Hey everyone, Brock here from AMG Authentic Men's Group. And today we're going to be continuing our series on the vulnerability myth. This is technically part three. We got the three amigos back here today. So excited to have you, Stephen and Reed, on this podcast. Give a shout out real quick.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm Reed from Nashville, Tennessee.
Hey, I'm glad to be back. Stephen from Springfield, Missouri area.
Well, guys, I'm excited to continue this conversation and kind of, Stephen, maybe break down kind of what we're talking about when we talk about emotional autonomy, and we'll get this thing fired up.
Yeah, so in this part three, we're going to be talking about the developing emotional autonomy in our relationships and kind of tying that to the circles of relationships. So, how do we navigate this space? We do it by building emotional autonomy. This means taking control of our own emotions. And by controlling, I mean understanding them, owning them, and managing them. It's about knowing ourselves and being responsible for our own state rather than numbing out, boxing up, or blaming other people. So,
Yeah, and that's one of the big reasons we're doing these podcasts is because this idea, this vulnerability myth that a lot of guys are perplexed by, is this idea of like, okay, if I just open up and I'm being vulnerable, then that equals a successful relationship. And that's not the full story. And so we want to lay it all out for you guys on what the full story looks like. And emotional autonomy is one of the big keys here and the big pieces here. So, what emotional autonomy will look like? And the best way to highlight that is like, what does the opposite look like? So, emotional immaturity is comments like, well, you made me feel this way. Or when somebody asks, like, hey, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm fine. When it's not the truth, when there's nothing backing behind that. So, emotional autonomy, what that looks like, is owning the feelings. I feel this way. It's okay for me to feel these emotions. This is my system communicating up to me. And I want to listen to that and get all the wisdom out of that so I can act accordingly in my relationships. I'm going to own these emotions and use my resources to care for myself, to do some coping skills, and even better, to do some self care, for the long term. So we can show up as our best self in all the relationships that we have. We want to be able to show up as our best self in everything.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So some of the steps to emotional autonomy that we're going to cover as we go through the circle of relationships here. The first step to emotional autonomy is being curious and non-judgmental while identifying body sensations, emotions, and feelings that are coming up. The second step is to communicate and explore these feelings with a trusted support system. And step three, owning your emotional well-being. Stop blaming others for how you feel. And step four, take proactive steps to work through these distressing emotions. Come up with a plan. What am I going to do to work through, to listen to what's coming up for me, caring for myself, and making appropriate steps to be able to work through those emotions in a healthy way.
Absolutely. And that's kind of, okay, so that's that's a lot, right? We're like, oh my goodness, that practice is it sounds daunting. But just like we talked about last time, it's about developing a skill. And, for us guys, we typically kind of want to see something a little bit maybe abstract brought into a concrete way of approaching something, how to practice that. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. The cool part about this is the circle of relationship is something we kind of all use in AMG, and I use it in my counseling practice. It's something that we've developed, and I really encourage you, if you haven't listened to the series on circle of relationships, go back and do that. But I'm going to give you a quick, brief shoot from the hip kind of overview of the circle of relationships. And then we're going to walk through them today and really hopefully kind of expand on these four steps you're talking about, Reed, in each circle. And obviously we can't cover like every dynamic of everything. So we'll just give kind of an example and what that might look like in each circle relationship. But if, really quickly, we look at number one circle being the self. This is when we look at our holistic and kind of our identity piece, right? You might look at your personality and who you are and what you bring to the world, and knowing you're a good man, not because, not if, but always knowing your identity is intact. So you are a good man. That's kind of the number one circle. How do we work on the self, the relationship with self? The number two relationship is the significant other. This is the person that we are both vulnerably with emotionally and sexually. This is a sacred relationship, and we really want to hold that with such, kind of bringing our health to a relationship as they do from their side as well. Number three relationship is your best friend. These are people that you can be completely vulnerable with. We practice this in groups because guys typically don't have best friends. If we do, we don't talk to them very often about deep and meaningful things. So group, we kind of practice that number three circle. So when keeping that in mind today, when we say, hey, process this in group, that's kind of what we're talking about, is the number three circle. And number four circle is going to be your family and friends. This is kind of like the tribe, the support network. This is the people we are authentic with. Then you keep moving. You've got your number five circle, which is your work relationship, things that are task oriented, either the people at work or people we do things with, in alignment with a task. And number six would be kind of the peripheral relationships. These are the people that maybe they've hurt you in the past. If they had an opportunity, they'd probably hurt you again. So we're kind of looking at boundaries there, and maybe looking at, probably can't trust them at all. We got to really be careful. That's a one-way street. And then the number seven circle is kind of all the stuff and all the things and the coping mechanisms that we have in life. We can look at alcohol, drugs, food, social media is a big one, TV. We can stream all day, kind of we talked about numbing last time. That's a pretty good way to do it. And so we'll kind of break down maybe an option there that we would look at. So there's kind of a fire hose effect of the circle of relationships. If that's something you're aware of, awesome. You've heard us talk about it. If not, go back and listen to the series. We've got it in the podcast. Did I miss anything there? Is that all? Does it sound right?
Yeah, that was great.
I've done that a time or two. Let's dive in. I think we're going to be it's going to be tough to get through all these in 30 minutes. And that's what we like to try to keep these podcasts to. So let's kind of dive in. The circle of relationship kind of being circle number one. This is when we're looking at the self. This is kind of processing our own self-talk in the emotional autonomy category here. How do we, what's the tone of our self-talk? What's the tone of the internal dialogue going on a daily basis? Are we really harsh with ourselves? Are we judgmental of self? Do we tend to have very little grace for self? Those are things that are really important to pay attention to, because that's what we're going to be transferring on into our other relationships as well. So kind of look at this as a fountain, so to speak. We're flowing from the inside out. And I kind of thought of like, what's a silly kind of example I can give here, but actually something I really practice every day. And something that is for me is I'm a very, very clumsy person. Anybody that knows me can laugh right now. I mean, literally in the last 24 hours, I promise you I've spilt something. So I'm a very clumsy individual, and that can be frustrating for other people and for self. Constantly breaking things or spilling things. And, there's some even kind of like, I don't know, trauma is probably a strong word, but like growing up, there was something that really annoyed my family as well. I'd be at the family dinner and I would be the one that spill. I think there was a week there where I spilled like my drink at the dinner table every night. And they're like, you're doing this on purpose, that kind of stuff. Right. So I'm like, it's in me, like, oh man, I suck at this. So anyways, that's something I've decided that, hey, my self-talk is actually very harsh when I am clumsy. So I want to pay attention to that. And that's where this emotional autonomy piece comes from. And so that's kind of become like my work, I guess, my emotional, spiritual, intellectual work, is that when I spill something, what's my tone? Or do I even chastise myself out loud? Do I kind of crack that whip? The reason I like using this is an awareness piece. If we look at, the be curious and not judgmental, and pay attention to the emotions that are going on, is I will typically get very angry with self. I will typically feel guilt or shame. And so that's something I want to pay attention to, that shows up in the body, that shows up in the mind. So that's a really key piece there. The second piece would be to communicate and explore these feelings. This is something I've processed with people close to me. I get to a place where I can laugh at it now, but for a while, it was kind of like embarrassing. And so really looking at how do I bring people in and process this with a trusted support system first, and then I can kind of play with it and have some fun with it. So really looking at how do I practice that with my significant other. My son is also very clumsy, so that gives us a good conversation to have of like, he gets to see me doing that thing and he also is that thing, and just kind of owning that. So that moves to the third one, it's owning our emotions. With me being a 2 on the Enneagram, I find myself typically liking to to blame other people because I'm trying so hard, and so I'll be in a hurry because I want to please everyone and I don't want to be late, or I want to make sure I'm serving people well. And then I might spill something or break something. And then I would look at like, well, if that person didn't if I wasn't doing this for that person, I wouldn't have done this. So I tend as a number 2 on the Enneagram to like to blame other people when things are going bad because of my motives are so good, right? Because I was just caring for people so well. And so I do really have to be aware of that and look at that, look at that kind of internally. And then finally, kind of just wrapping up here, like, who am I inviting into this? Take practice, the steps that I'm practicing. This is the part where I would really invite anybody that has like an inner dialogue that's kind of negative or critical, is to really, allow yourself to find, maybe the things that you don't plan to do, that they're genuine mistakes, and start that being your work of how is my inner dialogue, how's my tone towards myself. And I can know immediately, and it's not to an arrival place, because different weeks I have more stress than others. But I tell you what, when I spill something or I'm clumsy or break something and I'm hard with myself, I don't have to look very far for stress. I don't have to look very far for being overwhelmed. And so I've just learned, like, this is kind of my this is kind of my guru. My clumsiness is my guru. And when I don't plan it. Obviously, I'm not trying to spill things. Just, oh yeah, I did that on purpose. So it's a really good way to authentically ask myself, what's the tone? How am I, if I can laugh and go, oh my gosh, Brock, come on, or I go, gosh, or throw something else. That's a good indicator of where I'm at. And I can use that as a good practice. And honestly, it's, for me, it gets to be a daily practice. So I know it's a lot, but let's see if we can break down like the self-talk piece of emotional autonomy. That would be an example I would give.
Perfect. That's great. So circle 1, relationship with self, and circle number 2, relationship, is the relationship with our intimate partner. So in this section right here, the first step that we can do to build that emotional autonomy is being curious and non-judgmental while identifying, what's coming up for us and what's coming up in our system. This is such a crucial step in relationships. This is the first thing that I try to do as a relationship therapist, working with couples. If they're still pointing the finger at the other person and they're struggling to be curious and non-judgmental with the emotions that are coming up within themselves, we can't move forward. We can't make any progress until they're able to look inwards and say, oh, this is what I'm feeling right here, and bringing it to the table. Without judging themselves. A lot of times couples keep those emotions to themselves because there's fear that there is going to be repercussions for bringing that stuff up.
Yeah, I think the piece there that I would add on to is something we say all the time, is seek to understand before being understood. And so when you're saying be curious, how do you have an intimate relationship without seeking to understand somebody, right?
Right. Yeah. An acronym that I use with couples is this acronym SEEN. And it's basically looking inside and saying, okay, what am I scared of that will happen? What am I embarrassed of? What are my expectations? And what do I need? And if we're able to look inwards and ask ourselves those questions, what am I afraid of? What am I scared is going to happen? What am I embarrassed might happen? What are my expectations that I have in this relationship? What are my needs? That is being curious and non-judgmental with what's coming up. And we got to do a lot of work to be able to actually identify what those things are and to be able to communicate them in a safe and healthy relationship.
Love that.
The second step here is communicate and explore these feelings with a trusted support system. One of the things that we talk a lot about in the men's group and everything is like, your significant other is not your only support system. If that's the only person you're turning to talk about emotions and everything, you are putting a lot of weight on that significant other. You are giving them a lot of power, and God forbid they have a bad day and they're not able to show up for you.
Yeah, to your point, like if you look at just look at the partnering relationships and the circle of relationships, you're looking at your number 3s are really important, and your number 1 relationship's really important. So if you have a significant relationship, you got to be working on yourself, and you got to be working on, the other pieces of your vulnerability in other relationships or in groups or someone you can trust, a counselor, something, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what I love about, being involved in AMG. I'm able to go and process some things, and maybe even a hard conversation that I'm going to have with my wife. And then I'm not hiding things from her, but I'm processing it with him. And then I get to go to her and say, all right, this is what's coming up. But I've already worked through a lot of those big emotions and everything. And I'm able to be more present with her. And if she has big emotions around it, I'm able to be patient with her because I've already processed the stuff. I'm not doing the work with her right there in the moment. I'm able to hold space and allow her to feel those big emotions without me being impatient.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, perfect segue to your point. Sorry, Stephen. Just that your number three is to own your emotional well-being. I mean, that's where you're at, right?
Right.
That's what it takes you to.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we say so often that we want to process personally before we process relationally. And I think that's one of the benefits about, we can say process personally. Maybe that's our number one time when we are looking and, owning our emotions. Um, the great place, when we're talking about the number two relationship with our significant other, is, and Brock, you said it very well, that, and Reed, you kind of backed it up there, that we don't have to put everything, all of our vulnerabilities, all of our emotions on our number two relationship, because that can be more devastating for the relationship than helpful. So when we can get into a number three circle where, and Brock, in the intro, you kind of talked about this. This is where we practice that number three circle. We practice in the AMG groups. Um, some of the closest people in my lives have come through sitting with them in group where we're sharing these vulnerabilities and these dark feelings and the great feelings too. It's not all just the dark stuff. It's all the joys in life as well. And making those connections and practicing just bringing what we're feeling inside to the outside in a safe place, in a place where we've developed these relationships. We know it's non-judgmental, and that allows us to put it into the room and then take a look at it in a curious way. Take a look at it
Mhm.
and see what's really going on inside of me. And when I can do that and process in that setting where it's safe and process through actually what I'm feeling and get some feedback from the guys in group or get some feedback from my best friend, that's where maybe they're hearing something that I said where I'm not actually owning my emotion. And they can mirror that back to me and maybe challenge me on it a little bit. And Brock, you've, in my 8 years with you, have done fantastic of challenging something where I thought I had it figured out. And you're like, man, I'm hearing this in you. That allows me to process all the way through what I'm feeling. And then I can take that and go from a healthier place back into my number two relationship. Because, like you said, Reed, I've processed through it. So it's not somebody else's fault. It's not my wife's fault. I'm owning my part. And then I can go and have a much deeper, greater understanding of actually what's going on and see inside of me, what I'm feeling, what's
Yep.
going on.
Yeah, and the great Brian Frizzell would always say you're 100% responsible for 50% of the relationship, and that's you owning that 50% right there.
Mhm.
Being curious and non-judgmental, in the relationship, and owning what's coming up and saying, hey, this is what I can bring to the relationship, my 50%. Communicate and explore it with trusted support systems and those people that are there. And then owning your emotional well-being and stop blaming others how you feel. That is a cycle of disconnection that can happen in relationships when we're trying to.
You want to talk about you made me feel?
Oh, yeah.
Right, right. And it's just disconnecting when you're going to have a bonding conversation, when you're able to bring your stuff to the table and say, this
Mhm.
is what I'm feeling, and I want to know what you're feeling when you're ready. And having that back and forth, it's amazing. And then taking proactive steps to work through distressing emotions. Like we've talked about before, there's a difference between coping and there's a difference between doing long-term solutions like self-care. Coping is just helping you to get through the moment and get
Mhm.
through and we need to do that. I'm not shaming coping skills. We need to cope. Watching a TV show, getting lost, playing video games, doing different things. It helps us to kind of get through that day and get through that moment. But long-term self-care is actually doing those steps to work through those distressing emotions, identifying, okay, I'm feeling anger. What is my system trying to communicate to me? Oh, this may not be a healthy relationship, and I need to, communicate what's bothering me so it can become a healthy relationship and working through those things. That's self-care right there. That's working through those emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
household that I grew up in, we didn't do emotions, but the
Yeah.
emotion, because we didn't do emotions and talk about emotions, the one that came up was anger, and we were the what was modeled for me is it was always somebody else's or something else's fault that I'm angry, and so practicing coming into a place and working through like we do in AMG and having that number three. And it's having somebody, a safe space to go out and share my vulnerabilities with. Man, it's life changing, literally life changing.
Yeah, and I think it's important as we talk through these is like grabbing some proactive steps, right? And saying, okay, I'm gonna identify these people that I'm gonna process. I'm gonna process personally. I'm gonna identify my number threes. I'm gonna journal so that I can take this into group or counseling. Like you have proactive steps so you're not constantly reactive. And I love what you're saying, Reed. Like let's process through the big emotions. Everybody knows that fight in that big emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff gets said that you can't take back. So, process personally, like you said, Stephen, before relationally. And we've kind of used this two circle to talk about the three circle because it is so key. But Stephen, take us into kind of what is that number three circle looking like, and how do we kind of take this process?
All right, we'll pause here a second.
You're good.
What are you asking me now?
Sorry, I wanted to just get us moving forward. We felt like we were spinning a little bit there, but yeah, you just take the circle three and do your piece there.
Oh, okay. I thought we had kind of went through that already.
You kind of did, but then we went back. So I kind of want to just keep us, as we talked, maybe just do like as I've talked about, maybe just summarize that a little bit, and then we'll get into
what happens when I don't have
four
notes.
steps.
We go all over the place, all over the place. It's my fault, and I'm going to own it.
Where are we?
We just kind of blended 2 and 3, so that's fine. All right,
and that's a wrap, guys. Talk to you next time.
Right.
Okay. Yeah,
big pause here.
Okay, so recapping, circle 1 is yourself. Circle 2 is that intimate relationship. Circle 3 are the best friends that we have in life, those trusted relationships where we feel like we can just be completely vulnerable in a non-judgmental and safe space. And we get that in, like we talked about in the AMG groups. We can also develop those outside in other places in our life. These vulnerabilities, we want to kind of remind everybody that we want to be vulnerable, authentic with everybody, but vulnerable with a few. So these 1, 2, and 3 circles are where we really are probably going to share most of our true vulnerabilities because they are safer spaces. So this number 3 circle, I can tell you that in my personal life, the life-changing effects that have come from developing this number 3, it has taken so much pressure off of having to go to my wife and her managing my emotions. And I think that's what I did before. I brought in, she was supposed to be the person in my life that helped me manage my emotions. Boy, that's a lot to put on her. So having this number 3 in a place that I can go do that has really allowed me to unbox feelings that I'm having and work through them. And then, like we talked about, take that back into my number 2 relationship. So step 2, where we are communicating and exploring the feelings in a trusted support system, we kind of touched on that. We're going into, say, into group or into that number 3 circle, having a place that we can go in and unbox those things and kind of work through it.
If I could say, Stephen, I've even seen you on the journey where when we started AMG groups, you had AMG as your number 3 circle, but since then you've developed a number 3 relationship. So it's like you kind of go into group and practice. What does this vulnerability thing even look like in a number 3 circle? Then the whole hopes would be you go develop that outside of groups as well. And I've seen you do that, which is pretty cool to watch that happen in real time.
Yeah. And I will say that one thing I've learned about it is not everybody stays in a number 3 forever. Maybe in a moment or a time, somebody can move in and we can share that. Now, generally, number 3s are trusted and maybe we keep them, but we might not be communicating with them all the time. And that's okay too. That's okay too, right? So practicing developing or practicing the number 3 relationship has allowed me to go and see if I can develop number 3s outside of group. And for somebody that was taught to isolate feelings and isolate and not share, not trust people. And I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, and we don't trust people very well anyway. So to practice this and going in there has really freed me into a lot of creativity and getting to express my heart with people. And when we talk about step 3, own your emotional well-being and stop blaming others. Like I said before, the household that I grew up in, the emotion that we felt was anger, and it was always somebody else's fault. And because we packed everything else down in there. But when we can sit with somebody who we trust, a true number 3, that we know is not judging us, that we know loves us and cares enough for us that we can sit there and share whatever's going on. And we trust them enough that they can tell us what they're hearing, even if it's challenging our current perspective. That is so valuable. That's what we need. We don't need yes men. We need
Mhm.
people who love us enough that go, here's what I'm hearing what you say. And maybe that we need that perspective change. And when we have that, that allows us to go, oh, yeah, I see that. Take ownership of it. And when we take ownership of it, then we can start to change it. Then we can be intentional about doing something with it instead.
Mhm.
So, step four, take proactive steps. For us, I think the AMG groups for me specifically have been really life changing. And then that has also allowed me to build those number three relationships outside of that. Brock, you were talking about, in the number one circle, doing meditation, doing your journaling. Those are big keys to my health practice as well. I would say that we want to be cautious maybe to think that if we just build number three relationship and we just do the particular attributes of building a number three and we don't work on self and we don't work on the number two relationship, we're kind of missing the big picture. So it's not focus on one particular thing. It's really a blending of all of that, especially in the inner circles, the inner three circles.
Yeah, these first three relationships can be very synergetic and
Mm-hmm.
help all the other. When we're investing in our level one relationship, we're investing in two and three. We're investing in three, two, and one, and all the mix.
Yeah, that's great.
100%. And I think, too, just focus on the number three here as an action step is identify one or two, maybe three people that are trusted and say, okay, I want to develop that a little bit more. I want to practice this emotional autonomy, these 4 steps, and practice it with those people. You'll find out pretty quick if they are number threes, because it goes both ways. They may be shocked a little bit, but try to develop those. And if not, and you can't find anybody in your life that's that way, then definitely get into a group where you have got to have a place to process this stuff proactively, not reactively. Let's keep going here. Circle 4. I'll take that one. Family and friends. So we're talking about the tribe. And boy, oh boy, do we like to blame our family for stuff, don't we? So they created this mess. So yeah, just being curious is so important with family. I mean, we're talking about holidays right now, and really anytime you're around a family event, just being really curious about what is this weird thing we have as a family? Like, what are these dynamics that I have? And I will find that there's past hurts and there's past enjoyable memories that are in family. We didn't get to choose them, but boy, we've been around them, and maybe they installed some of those buttons that we have. And so it's really being intentional about how am I being curious versus judgmental, and maybe even curious about what makes them tick. Like, let's not make it about us. A pretty good indicator if family is getting in the way of us being in an enjoyable space, it's probably some inside work to be done. We're not going to change other people. We can change 2 things, which is ourselves and right now. So, I think family is a great one because, we didn't get to choose them, and here we got them. And there's probably lots of memories and past hurts that are involved in that. And so you kind of get to see, how well we've worked through those things and how curious is our stance with family. I think moving from there, you go kind of into, okay, well, how do I communicate and explore with trusted support system? For me, I've already kind of started processing. If you're in my groups the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about some family dynamics that we have. And then I talk about it with my significant other as well. And just trying to get a perspective from other people, because I know it's close to home. That's why counselors don't counsel their family members, right? Because it's too close to home. I'm a human being and I've got my triggers as well. And so I'm trying to be proactive in that and, really look at trying to process, anything with my wife, and then guys in group as well as we go into the holidays or any kind of events with the family. I think that's really key. And then owning my own emotional well-being and stop blaming others. It's so easy to blame others on this one. Family is an easy target. You guys are crazy. You guys do this, and I got it figured out, right? And so this is tough, and let's acknowledge that it is difficult. I'm not saying that we're just supposed to get to this place where everything's okay, but just make sure that we're owning it and we're looking for our own emotional well-being. I always say, take severe ownership. I statements. I am communicating. Maybe you communicate what you want to see happen going into a holidays with your family members. And if you process the big emotions, like you said, Reed, then it's more of a pleasant communication of, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what I want to do. And you don't have to be, well, you're always like this and I don't have to be there, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And yes, a lot of times family members created a lot of the issues early growing up and everything, but it's not their responsibility to fix it, nor can they. I've
Yeah.
worked with a lot of people that have had family members that do not fix or do even try to fix themselves or the problems that they've created. And I've seen people heal and move on and live healthy lives. And I've seen it the other way around where the family members did open their eyes, did work on themselves, did grow and everything. And the people they've hurt still struggle to move on. They
Mhm.
don't have the key to moving on. Like it is totally inner work. And these are the steps that can help you.
Love that 100%. And just looking at, being proactive a little bit here, right? So if we're, like you said, it's all synergistic. So if we work on ourselves and our inner relationships, it will be a little bit, at least a smoother transaction or transition. And so really looking at communicating needs ahead of time is pretty crucial. So if you're going into a family event and it is kind of dicey, it's okay to realize I can probably only be in that setting for 2 hours. I'm going to go ahead and communicate that and get out of there. But assert yourself in a non-judgmental way and be proactive on how you want that to look. And like you said, it's up to us, right? We can't have other people. We're not sitting
Right.
here like if they would change, then I would. That's a very, very, that's a dangerous place to be. And so just kind of just being intentional. And back to your point, Stephen, vulnerable with a few, authentic with everyone. And this is that relationship we're authentic with. This is who I am. This is who I want to be. If you can own that, this is who I want to be. Then I will step into these relationships that way.
There we
Yeah.
go. Circle 5 is our relationship with work, other tasks, and obligations and commitments that we have. Um, Being emotional, having that emotional autonomy at work is so important. Us being able to own and be curious and non judgmental with what's coming up for us is so important. Our jobs that we work, they are not responsible for us working through our emotions in a healthy way. Will we be held accountable if we aren't?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We will get fired if we don't come in and work that. And that's why it's so important to be assertive and set healthy boundaries at work. Um, because sadly, I've seen people work themselves like crazy and then eventually get fired because they pop off because they got no help and they're overworking themselves and doing all these things. Your boss, your supervisor, I make me. They're not going to set boundaries for you.
Mm-mm.
They are going to work you as long as you're willing to work.
Mm-hmm.
In some environments, and maybe there's healthy environments. I don't want to be totally pessimistic, but it is your responsibility to be curious and non-judgmental and notice what's coming up. Something that I try to do in my own life. I used to work at Starbucks. Used to be a barista. Hey,
Ooh.
they would ask me to work overtime all the time. And what I had to do was go through the circle of relationships in my mind. How's my level 1 relationship? Is it doing all right? How's my level 2? If I got date night, I better get out of there quick.
Mm-hmm.
How's my level 3? Have I spent time with my close people?
Mm-hmm.
And if all those are doing good, yeah, I'll stay late. But I want to check in with myself. I need to own that. I need to work on that. If I don't have anything to give, I don't need to be staying late, right? So
That's
be
good.
curious and non-judgmental while identifying what's coming up for us. Communicate and explore these feelings with a trusted support system. We spend quite a bit of time at our work. It better be fulfilling. It better be there. And if it's not, let's talk to some people. Let's get that help, to be able to explore and see those things and even get a little bit of camaraderie, knowing like, oh yeah, that is frustrating. Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
you know, Own your emotional well-being and stop blaming others. Your boss isn't gonna make you healthy at work.
Mm-hmm.
Like straight up, that's
And your
inner
work's
work.
not going to make you have total fulfillment. You can't get
Great.
all your fulfillment from work.
Yes. And then taking proactive steps to work through distressing emotions. You can set up a meeting with your boss. Your boss doesn't have to be the only one setting up the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
If there's issues, set up a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
right? Be proactive, work through those things, set healthy boundaries. If you're not fulfilled at your job and doing what you want to do, meet with them and say, hey, this is where I want to be next year. What do I need to do
Yeah.
to get there?
I think you're dead on. And even looking at your own personal life, like you alluded to, is can you plot your week and say, am I being well rounded in my circle of relationships? That's being pretty proactive, right? If you
Right.
plot it and you know it and you're aware of it, then all of a sudden saying no to work is way easier when I'm saying yes to
Yep.
something I care really about or someone I really care about.
And it's
Well,
okay if work doesn't understand. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I love that thought of just ahead of time being intentional about where I'm going to put my energy, time, and resources, what circle, and making sure that that 5 circle is only getting the energy that the 5 circle deserves and not stealing from my number 1, number 2, number 3 time.
Yep. That's great. It's got to serve the inner relationships, right? Well, let's keep moving here. We're cutting up on time here, so let's wrap up on number 6, relationships. Stephen, kind of looking at what would be kind of a quick way to look through, these steps.
So the number 6 relationship is the peripheral. Those would be maybe people or enemies or people that have hurt us in the past. Some place that we need to practice setting boundaries. I would say let's make sure that we're being very intentional about limiting how much of our vulnerabilities and all of our energy, time, and resources are going into that number 6 circle, because it's not deserving, it's not life-giving, it's not going to be reciprocal, it's going to be draining, it's going to be taking from us. So we want to give from overflow there, not from something that's our own love and our own life energy. So step 2, communicate and explore these feelings. I'm not for sure that I would, do a lot of other than setting boundaries. That would be the main thing in here, is just to make sure I'm setting boundaries and saying, no, I'm not going to allow this person or this situation to be taking from me my precious energy, time, and resources. And then as far as owning our emotional well-being, step 3, I think just recognizing who, what should be in that 6 circle, owning that and being okay with it, being okay that that's really where this person needs to be in my life right now. They don't need to be in there and have a lot of ownership of, or even knowledge of, my vulnerabilities. And I say, as far as step 4, the proactive steps to work through it, just practicing the circles themselves, and where am I putting my energy, time, and resources in all of the circles. That practice can help us work through distressing emotions, especially out here in the 6th circle.
Yeah, we often say don't give any energy to your enemies, right? So these are your enemies, people. We don't want to be giving them a lot of energy. So if you have been giving them energy, work through it, to your point, Stephen, so you're not giving them a bunch of energy, time, and resources. Right. Often the people that have hurt us the most get the most energy. And it's like, well, that's not good. That's living way out in circle 6.
Yeah. And then that energy that we're giving them, we're sacrificing our inner circles for those people. That's not going to be life-giving back to us.
Yep.
We
absolutely.
Give love where we can get love.
Love it. I'm going to wrap up real quick with circle 7, because we are up on time here. So appreciate you going on the journey with us. I like this idea that you said earlier, Reed. There's coping mechanisms, and then there's healthy, strategic, ways to live long term. Circle 7 stuff is coping mechanisms, right? The things that give us that dopamine drip, that feel great in the moment, all the different coping. We have so many ways to cope anymore. We can distract ourselves, numb ourselves all day, every day. But I thought of something when you were talking, is how are we, it's important to lick our wounds, to heal our wounds. So if we are distressed, overwhelmed, feeling burned out, go ahead and go to a coping mechanism. It's okay to lick your wound. But if you sit there and keep licking your wound, you create a worse wound, right? So go ahead and, get recalibrated if you need to in a circle 7 thing, and then go, what are some more long-term, maybe higher level ways to proactively be aware of these things. And so, something I often see in like men's groups is, we're looking at food, alcohol, pornography, TV, video games. Those are things that we like to numb with. And so those are things just to be curious about. Don't judge yourself. I guarantee you there's a lot of data there. And Reed, you always say like the outer circles are meeting a need of a vacancy in the inner circles. So we want to pay attention to these outer circles for sure. We're probably spending a lot of time there. Honestly, guys spend a lot of time in their 5 and 7 circles. So let's be really curious about what's going on there. What need are we trying to meet? And let's look for maybe a healthier approach.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, gents, we did it. We blasted through 7 circles. I think we, went as fast and as far as we could on this one.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It's always fun with you guys.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Good to be here again.
Absolutely. Yep. Take care. Have a great one.